First of all, mate, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome to the Higher Health Podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing amazing, mate. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. So, Gary, first up, like as you just mentioned, we have some similar mentors from afar, similar interests, similar people that we like to I don't know, just learn from and grow from. And so I've seen some of the stuff that you've put out, and I've got to say that the message really resonates. So for those who aren't familiar with what you do, how would you define, how you describe in your own words what it is that you do?
Yeah, so in my coaching, I like to get to the deepest layer of code because when you can get to that, there's like this hierarchy that kind of transcends them through to our behavior. Most people focus on behavior. What's wrong? Oh, I'll look at the action that came before it. But what led to that behavior in the first place? And that for me is why mindset is so pivotal, is because when we get to that deeper subconscious code, then you start to impact the behavior naturally. It just comes as a consequence. So just changing behavior for me doesn't do anything because you haven't got to the root cause. And that's why things just keep coming back, a bit like painting over rust. Yeah. So yeah, I love to get to that deepest level of code. I've been blessed to study under quite a few amazing mentors that have shown me how to do that, and it's pretty rapid fire now, which is really wonderful.
I guess would it be correct to say that it's like delving into sort of the subconscious belief and patterns, things that have been like deep rooted in there from way back when?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's those kind of deeper subconscious, what I call programming or code, as you mentioned, is it's established from our earliest years. And we have no idea that that's where we start to form our perspective. And from that standpoint, we then live in that world. So this subconscious programming, it literally creates like a lens that we look through. Therefore, everything we see on the other side of that lens is commensurate to the actual lens itself. So we want to get behind it to spot, okay, what is the programming that creates that lens, and literally shatter the lens. And then everything changes. It's like a beautiful quote by Dr. Wayne Dyer. It's one of my favorites. And he literally says, when you change the way you look at the world, the way the world looks changes. I've kind of butchered that. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's one of my favorites because your perspective creates your reality. So to be able to hear in language, and that language for me is the code. Yeah, that's how you're able to discover where that perspective was built, to go back to it and to reveal that it was never true. And that for people is literally like mind blowing, right? And that's where they step into this space of inner freedom. And from there, anything is possible, literally limitless. And that's why, my brand is Live Limitless. So it's getting back to that, but that can be tricky because we do push it down. We not only suppress it, but we repress it, which is deeper. So we're actually doing it out of our conscious awareness. So that's the art of the coach, to get into via the language is the access codes to that programming. Did that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, so repression being like a unconscious, unknowing, pushing down.
Yeah, so it can be so severe. Let's say there was an experience where, let's say you're under 7 years old, that you can't even rationalize really beneath seven. Something happens, you can't process it. If it's so severe, it can just be pushed under awareness. So from that standpoint, it's not even subconscious, it's deeper. So that can be quite hard to retrieve. And, that might involve some other modalities to get to that. But from my standpoint too, it's not always necessary because the perspective, it does reveal itself in the present moment. So it's helpful, it's handy to get to the deeper code and where it was established, but you start to be able to track it back, even if you can't get to that exact moment. But generally you can. If somebody feels safe, they feel held, you know, with a coach, then they're much easier able to access that.
Mm. That's really interesting. We'll delve deeper into like the how you actually go about tackling that sort of challenge. But I'm curious to know, like, first of all, what it was in your life that caused you to take this path and do the work that you do today.
Yeah, so for me, it was burning out, just completely exhausting myself and getting to a point of just being so low that I actually wanted to leave the world. And so it was getting to that point of, do I leave or do I stay? And what's one thing that I can at least try and grasp onto to try and stay, because I love my family so much. So for me, like, hopefully what we were just talking about will actually make it all make sense, because I actually got to this point when I was about 11 or 12, because I used to be bullied at school. And for me, I didn't feel enough because it was due to my weight, is how I was, you know, bullied, and I was in a foreign country and I just wasn't accepted, and it left me feeling incredibly isolated. So that feeling of isolation is incredibly scary for somebody on so many levels. It's actually a primal fear, because if we're isolated, if we're alone, there's the fear of a perceived threat, as in survival, right? That's what's going on the deepest level. But for that little 11-year-old, he just wasn't accepted and made it mean I'm not enough, I'm inadequate. So, you know, from that's almost where it was started, this world of not enoughness. So what was the adaptation? Do everything to be enough. Perfectionism, people pleasing, right? You know, get fit, then people will like me. So, you know, we share common things here. And I was actually a PT when I was in my 20s. So that was my first entry into it. So yeah, it was that was the starting point at about 11 or 12, and I didn't know a way out. Luckily, I've got beautiful parents, and they took me out of the situation, started a new life back in England, because I am English, but we was over in Germany for a bit. So that's where that started. But that then became a pattern of a lifetime. So in every area, because I'm looking through that lens of I'm not enough, then everywhere I wasn't enough. So I had to be fit, I had to be rich, I had to have the right girl on my side, the number one business. When I get, then I'll be enough, then I'll be happy. But it was more like, then I'd feel relief, because that's a tunnel without any cheese, right? You can't get there. It's the hamster in the wheel, because what's enough, and who made up that rule, right? So, but that's what led me to completely burning out, passing out on my office floor. And on the surface, it all looked pretty, right? Body was in pretty good shape. You know, the business doing great. Money was coming in, had a really nice relationship, but it was still not enough, right? So for me, that was my entry point into personal growth. I didn't know it existed, had no idea. And then discovered this industry, like finding Tony Robbins. I think that's a very common way in, like he's everywhere, right? Like he's a big dude. And yeah, it wasn't actually Tony that got me fully in. It was a different mentor that I discovered, I would say by accident, but there's never any accidents in my world. And I actually met him yesterday. He lives here in Tenerife. Yeah, I just watched one of his kind of interviews. It was like a podcast, and I was like, oh, I resonate with this dude. Like, and that was it for me. I was just in. I was then just went after it, because it was actually survival for me. You know, if I didn't turn that corner, there was a different corner I wanted to jump off. So, you know, what's so beautiful though is, because I've hit that lowest of the low to the point of planning it, like, how am I going to leave? It gives me such a level of depth when I'm sat in front of somebody coaching them and they say, like, Gary, you just don't understand. Like, this is how I feel. I'm like, I do. I really get it. So for me, that was like my gift, I feel, for this journey that I'm now on, where I just feel so on purpose. It really allows me to sit with someone, hold a space from a place of love, and really get where they're coming from. Long answer.
No, but I love it. I love it. Just out of curiosity, who was the mentor, the person that you met yesterday?
Yeah, it's a guy called Peter Sage.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, he's a big personal growth guy. He was actually Tony Robbins' youngest ever trainer, I believe. And he's been on his own journey. More of a business guy, but focuses on all different areas of life. But he was my introduction, and yeah, over time we've connected and are friends. So it was, it's cool to connect in that way. But yeah, it was great for me because I was still under like the impression, oh, if I can learn like how to do business a little bit better, then then I'll be enough. Then like I'll be happy, I'll be fulfilled. And what was so great about Pete was that he's like a master around business and personal growth, so business mindset especially. But because he has that underlying, let's call it esoteric or spiritual kind of level to his coaching, where he gets to the deeper code, that was my entry into spirituality as well, and really bringing that deepest level of code that observes the subconscious programming.
Mm.
That was my journey onto different mentors as well. Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's more of a distant mentor, not someone I'm personally connected with. Peter Crone, who I think and
I've listened to enough of his stuff to feel like I do.
yeah, he's a cool dude, and I've actually done some coaching with him.
Mm-hmm.
Been blessed to get some time with him, which was cool. And David R. Hawkins is probably my main man in
Letting Go by David Hawkins.
it's a great book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's many more.
Oh, yeah, there's loads, but yeah, that was the starting point for me.
Nice.
From what you were saying just a moment ago, it makes me think that of the whole premise that a lot of the times the things that we end up helping others with are typically the things that we first and foremost have struggled with at some point in our own lives. And that, like you said, it gives you the ability to really meet the person where they're at and really understand where they're coming from. And I think that's a very powerful gift.
Yeah, it's like our struggles become the gift that we get to contribute to other people. And from that's like just such a wonderful way to shift perspective on the challenges that you've had, right? It really allows you to go, right, yeah, I went through that. I know how it feels. And that for somebody just gives them hope, because it's oftentimes when they're at their lowest point, it doesn't have to be the point that I got to, but things feel really hopeless and they feel helpless. So to be able to inspire that within somebody else, where you're the inspiration for change, is massive. So I think what you said was right on point.
I love it. Do you think then it's necessary for someone to reach a low point like that in order to then have the drive within them to step towards, I guess that sort of personal growth, that sort of personal change trajectory?
Yeah, so I would say no, but what I would say is that it's more commonplace. Yeah, Jim Rohn's got a great quote in that he says, most people do either change for inspiration or desperation. But I would say most people that I come across, it's that desperation. It's almost like it's written in to the code of life that it needs to get bad enough before we're willing to look at it.
Mm.
However, there can be, you go to a conference, or you go and hear a speaker, or you read a book, and it's just like, so you don't have to hit that, rock bottom, but I find it's more commonplace. My favorite thing, and why I love to, do my one-to-one coaching, my group coaching, and speaking, is to just hopefully be more of an inspiration, so that people don't have to get there, that they can learn from, what I went through. But for me, I needed it. I just had to I had to get there, because for me, I don't think, I would have actually gone on that trajectory without it. But I always make the joke in the if there was a magical genie and it said, oh, I can come and like erase your history, I'd just say, don't you go near it. Because without it, I'm not the man I am today. And I love the man that I am today. And because if you can trace back to what I was saying, coming from a person that literally didn't feel adequate in any way, that would never have come out of my mouth. So it's just when you reveal, let's say, that pattern to not be true, like it's just fundamentally not true, and there's no more arguments left, you're just left with freedom, peace, joy, and what I say is our natural state.
All the good stuff. That's a powerful mindset to have. You know, one mindset is to have the mindset like you're talking about, whereby you are grateful for everything that's happened, even the stuff that at the time feels like complete shit.
Yeah.
But you know, when you expand the time horizon, it's served value and it's helped shape you into the person that you are. And I guess the alternative is to cling on to those negative things and to continue to, I guess, live within the despair and to sort of almost like play the victim a little bit. And I guess you have to ask yourself, like, what's going to serve me most?
Yeah, it's such a shame. You know, I used to be the king of victim mode, right? Because if we can't be significant, well, we can be a significant victim. Yeah, we get to be the worst at everything, weirdly, that we feel special. And so, yeah, the victim mindset doesn't take you anywhere, you know, and some people will transition out of that by using force, and they'll get into more of this kind of go-getter mode where they get a little bit like inspired and they're like, I'm gonna do it. And then they hop onto the YouTube and they're like, you can do it, and like force your way through. And it, like, bless them, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean you can't, wherever you want to get to, you got to take action. But to force yourself to get away from what you don't want doesn't work, because you haven't got to the root cause as to why you're trying to get away from it. So for me, I help people go from freedom rather than fear. So to find freedom first, but then you got to move your ass, right? If you want to create something. But as long as you're creating from a space of fear, you're never going to be fulfilled, because you're just getting away from stuff.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a new client the other day, and you know, she was reeling off these things that she wasn't happy about how she's not perhaps where she was at X number of years ago. And in my mind, and actually I did express it to her as well, I said, it seems like right now there's a lot of resistance. There's like a lot of resistance to where you're at right now. You're like, you don't want to actually just fully accept who you are and where you're at. And I think it's very tough to, as you're saying, really move forward and create positive change when you're still living in resistance, living from a place of fear, as you said, rather than from a place of self-acceptance, sorry, and a bit more freedom.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you've got resistance to reality, you're going nowhere, right? So the very first step is finding acceptance. It is how it is, and it couldn't be different, because it's not, right? And it's just like when you get that, and you can start to traffic back in time to history and find acceptance for that. That's where you start to let go. So it's, you know, it's our resistance to our history that acts like an energetic weight that we carry around in the present. But people are so completely oblivious to it. It's just like, no, I'm just shit. You know, I'm just not enough. Or, you know, they're living in a world where they don't feel safe because something scary happened that they couldn't process. You know, so until you get to that acceptance of history, you're literally like carrying energetic weight like a backpack, trying to move forward. You just don't go anywhere. So you're right, it's finding acceptance first and foremost, but it's not through adding anything to you. It's a shift in awareness to realize that there's nothing ever wrong with you, and to realize that what happened in your history happened for, it literally has happened from a very logical standpoint. When you really get the, you know, Pete Crone, he's got a great quote that what happened happened and couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. Right. And from a very logical human perspective, we can go, okay, you know, you could put equals acceptance. for that. Okay, it happened. And from that standpoint, whether you can accept on that logical level, that's sometimes enough to be able to go, okay, I'm at where I'm at. Now, what do I want to do? But it can be oftentimes to find that logical acceptance will take them a layer deeper. And, you know, that can bring about what I call profound acceptance, which is a slightly different, more esoteric conversation, but it can really help people if they're open to that.
I really like that. So then, what would be like one of the first things that you try to address then when you're working with a new client, when someone comes to you and they reel off all of these perceived problems, these things that are going wrong in their life? Where do you start?
It sounds really simplistic, but I just listen. Because one of for me, the major thing that makes a coach an incredible coach is their ability to listen, and to be able to listen behind what they're saying. So for me, I listen. And people are like, I pay you a lot of money just to listen to me, right? But it's just like, no, I'm literally, when I'm with someone, I'm listening out for almost telltale language that's pointing them in a direction where they're showing me their world that they're living in, right? So if their conversation is very future orientated, let's put it in the bucket of anxiety. It's going to be, I'm worried about something that's going to happen, right? Or it might be talking about history. So you're really listening where they're stuck in time, as in going forward or going back, and being able to then work them, or kind of walk them through, understanding that moment has either happened or you don't know what's going to happen. And when they really get that, you kind of collapse time and you're just left here in the present. And pretty much nobody has a problem right here, right now. It's like you and I, we don't have a problem right now. Like, we're having a great conversation, and if something turned up, we'd handle it. So to answer your question, I'm really listening, but I'm listening for what's underneath it. And the code that we were talking about before, that's the language. Yeah. The different words that they use, they might have things like shouldn't, like I shouldn't have done that, or they shouldn't have done that. Right. So instantly we've got somebody making someone wrong. Judgment. Right. That's a ton of resistance. Right. They shouldn't have done that. So how can we find acceptance for that? So it's pointing back to certain things, and especially back in their history. And that's the art of the coach, just to be able to hear from what they're saying and be able to take them to that point, find acceptance, peace, and now we can create, right? So that's kind of, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I've often, I guess, found challenging, both with myself and perhaps even when I'm talking to other people, is like, okay, so like you were saying, you sort of whittle down to the thing that happened when you were 12 years old, the event that caused you to hold on to these certain beliefs that you hold about yourself, i.e., I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, whatever that belief might be. But once you've reached that stage, what would then be the step to move beyond that belief?
Yeah, it's to invalidate it. Right. So the way to find true inner peace, or you can use the words joy, freedom, these are for me what are the qualities of the soul. Right. To get to those, it's not about adding anything, it's actually about dissolving what's there. So whenever I've got someone sat in front of me and they're telling me their story, I'm sitting there in front of them knowing that there's nothing wrong with them, that there's not a problem, and I'm just about to hear what they believe to be true and show them why that's not it, right? Why it's not true. And when they can see that, which is the invalidation of it's their world for them. It's subconscious. It's not like they're walking around going, I'm inadequate, or I'm not safe, or, I'm not going to be okay. It's just like, that's just how they interpret and perceive the world. But when they can see, oh, wait a minute, I'm perceiving it that way, and that's where it started, they get the why. And then you take them back to that moment and help them understand it and process it. Yeah, it's a bit like indigestion. It's just like it keeps repeating on you until you process, right? And it's the same with history. So to get beyond it, it's actually looking at that event and understanding why it was perceived to be that way. And some people have gone through some really tough stuff. Yeah. But when they can look at it from a new perspective, it's a shift in perspective, and there can be an understanding of it, whether it's with another person, they can have compassion, love. That enables them to literally integrate it, accept it. And that's the letting go, the discarding. That's the energetic weight. And suddenly they're like, whew, like, oh wow, like I've been holding on to that. And oftentimes they're completely oblivious to it. So, it's so fun to sit down with people, and within like 15 minutes, I know where they're trapped. Or to be honest, it's oftentimes within a sentence. So it's just, that's been a progression of my journey, just getting faster, quicker, more accurate. And that's been a result of my own investment in my own personal growth and listening to some pretty inspiring people. So
It's almost like the stories that people have about themselves and about their lives are implicit. That it's detectable in their language, but they're not openly and explicitly saying the things that they believe or feel about themselves. And so you listen to the language, pull it apart, and then just show it to them, and they go, "Oh, shit, that makes sense."
Yeah, that's oftentimes a reflection I get, like, "Oh shit, that makes a lot of sense." Right? It's just like, and suddenly, yeah, their whole life just makes sense for the first time ever. It's just like, oh, I can see how the cascade, and now I'm here. But oh no, that was never actually true. Right. And from that standpoint, they just let go of that entire weight that they're carrying, and they're liberated. It's a world of freedom. And that can be really weird for them to adjust to, that it takes. So for me, it's like how I coach. I don't want to say I hit them with it, but it's just like we break them free into a new world where they're literally seeing life through a new lens, let's say. But that world is totally unfamiliar because they got really used to the comfort of, let's say, a victim role in their life where they just felt not enough. So for me, that's then the journey of integration, of being able to keep somebody there, because that code is very, very strong. It's been consistently repeated over and over again to the point where it became subconscious. They're not conscious to it. So it's very easy to go back into what they were familiar with, even though it was uncomfortable, but it's familiar. So that's then almost a hand holding on that journey until they can keep recalling the new level of awareness enough that it completely invalidates it. Some people are super fast, like one session can be enough for somebody, and they're like, I got it. Or for some people, it's a little bit longer. Or depending on age, that can make a difference too. If they're, I'm blessed to have some clients 70s, 80s, right? And where I'm doing like a lot of history. And that can take a little bit of time because that's had more time to integrate, where it's become more, it's been just repeated more often, and they've got more references too, right? See, I told you I'm not enough. Congratulations. You're right about your not enoughness, right? So it's, it can get pretty sticky, but that for me is the journey of a coach.
So you mentioned this, like, you mentioned that it is a case of almost solidifying that awareness. Obviously, you help reveal that awareness or create that awareness slightly, and then for them it's a case of just constantly reinforcing it. What are some of the ways in which you'd help facilitate that, help encourage someone to develop greater awareness of the patterns or behaviors or beliefs they hold on to at this moment in time?
Yeah, so for me, a big step a lot of coaches miss is really coaching about being able to observe those patterns. So it's good to know the patterns, but if you're completely lost in your mind in history or future and you're not present, then you can't see it because you're lost in it. So for me, a big part is presence. And once you have presence, then being aware of these patterns, which is what you were speaking into. But then for me, it literally is having a morning practice or a daily practice. For me, I'm a morning guy, but I like the morning time because you set your frequency straight from the get-go. I'm up at 5 a.m., like without fail. And for a lot of people, they've just turned off this podcast. They're like, I don't want to do that, right? But for me, I didn't used to be a 5 a.m. guy. It's just something I love now. By kind of, 7, 8 o'clock, I've achieved more than most people do in a week. But it's having a morning practice that covers mind, body, soul. So it involves a gratitude practice, which is like very common, and I love that. It's got a lot of kind of traction, but not everybody practices it in what I would say is a powerful way. So for me, I have a gratitude practice. I journal. This is not like brand new information for a lot of people, right? But from that standpoint, I'll also do some personal growth work, whether it's reading something, a spiritual text that I'm looking to learn from, or listening to a podcast, whatever. There's something about that early part of the morning where you're still kind of in a theta brainwave state, where you absorb information a bit quicker. So I like to hack the system a little bit, and from there it's movement. If a lot of people say, oh, is your main priority mindset? And I'm like, no, it's health. Because without my health, I don't have a mindset. So for me, I'm a big gym guy. I think I shared with you before we hopped on. I used to be a personal trainer in my 20s before I went into went into a hotel as a career, hospitality, which was the beautiful moment that left me on my office floor. But so yeah, so I've got that in my background. So it's having a solid morning practice that's consistent. And if you're consistently repeating all of these awareness shifts, then over time they become integrated. And then you just start catching yourself during the day where you slip into the old pattern. I coach people to celebrate when that happens. Most people berate themselves. I'm like, no, like if you hadn't caught it, you'd still be in it. So for me, the game of life is not about not getting hooked by our ego or by these old patterns. It's the amount of time that you stay hooked that will determine the quality of your life. So that becomes the beautiful game of awakening out of these patterns, correcting course. And if you keep doing it over and over again, eventually it just falls away. This is where the beautiful work of, let's say, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he really goes into the neuroscience of how, habits work and how they dissolve too, which is really fun. So
yeah, like you were saying, it's like taking care of the vessel that is just the meat suit that we occupy, taking good care of that if you want to, ultimately have a mindset and a mind that is well functioning, and that allows you the ability to catch yourself when you do slip awareness wise, you do slip out of that state of greater self-awareness. And I think it makes me think of, for instance, I might have been hearing like Eckhart Tolle or some other spiritual teacher talk about meditation and saying it's not just the case of doing like 15 minutes or 10 minutes of meditation in the morning and then just blindly going about the rest of your day and completely like putting all that to one side and forgetting about it. Instead, try and use like the entirety of your day, every opportunity you get, to be an opportunity to essentially to meditate, just to be mindful even, rather than just saying this is my meditation time and then the rest of the day I'm just going to run around like a bull in a china shop and just cause chaos and have no awareness of what's going on, but instead trying to integrate that into your daily life.
Yeah, so it's about making it a way of being and making it a practice. I mean, you've got traditional meditation, which is just sit down, closed eyes. But for me, I prefer more of a contemplative meditation, which is I'm going throughout my day present to the most, to the best of my ability. Right. So even my gym, I call an active meditation. And that's why the gym is like really awesome if you're really locked in. Because if you're focusing on every movement that you're doing, then it's really tough to get lost thinking about your history or what's going to happen later in the day, because you're just there. And that's why so many athletes that I'm blessed to coach, they love that part of their training, right? And to make it like an active meditation. So yeah, it's about taking it through for the rest of your life. And when you discover the joy that you step into, you won't want to trade it out. Now, do you go what I call unconscious? It's not literally unconscious, but like lost in the mind. Sure, you're human. Can you be 100% present all the time? I mean, very few beings in the world, right? So from that standpoint, it's just, if you can up level 1%, it's going to be massive. But it's in that presence that you're able to spot all of these old patterns that you're no longer committed to. And then you get to focus on, what do I want to create? Not because when I get, then I'll be more significant, or then I'll be enough, or then people will like me, or then I'll be loved, I'll be wanted, I'll be accepted, but just for the fun of it, because you can. That's so different. So yeah, it's making it a way of being. And that takes practice, because we're very trained by, this is what's so tough in our outer environment. Everything is pulling our focus outwards, in so much as all of these beautiful devices that can be so helpful for life, if they're not used in a conscious way, they're gonna use you, right? And this is like one of the things I share with my clients, is to use technology consciously, because otherwise, as I just said, it's going to use you, and you're going to be at the mercy of the message of whatever you're sat in front of. I could go on a rampage about the news, but I'm not going to, right? But it really is, becoming conscious of what's going on.
Yeah, you're going to get pulled from sort of pillar to post by social media, by devices, by all the stuff that's being projected onto you. So I do think, as you're saying, it's so important to have a practice, have some form of practice, whether it can be something physical, as you're saying, whether it be in the gym. It can be simply a meditation or a moment of mindfulness, something that just like roots you, that grounds you into your body, rather than just being so wrapped up in your mind all the time. And as you say, with regards to movement and exercise, it's very tough to be caught up in your head when you are being challenged physically, when you're putting your body to work. And so I think that's why it's such a powerful thing to embody, to have in your life. And that everyone really ought to have some sort of movement practice. It could even just be going on a walk. It doesn't have to be anything too intense, but just having something that grounds you is undoubtedly a positive thing.
Yeah, and I find like also, if people are there and they're like, oh, I don't want to work out, like I hate the gym, or even they can't find a sport that they really can bring out a little bit of joy to get them moving. It can just be breathing. And that sounds so simplistic, but if you're focused on your breath, that is one of kind of the doorways out of the mind, is to really focus on the breath. And hopefully everybody's breathing out there. Otherwise we've got a bigger problem, right? But it's that in itself. So it can be really simple to start the process.
What are some of the common themes or common challenges that get brought to you by clients?
Yeah, so it's different for everyone. I work with a lot of different people, going from like athletes who are, they know that there's just a little bit more available to them, and they're not really suffering too much. And then there's to the people that are actually really suffering from depression or anxiety. It's just such a big range. But I find that it can really be bucketed into almost three things, just to make it's a lot more complex. But it's just, generally there's a feeling of not enough for someone. That's a really common one. I haven't ever met anyone that doesn't have some form of not enoughness about them. And then the others in around safety, that they just don't feel safe, and that they're not going to be okay. And then the other common theme is lack. I don't have enough, generally of stuff, right? So it's by being able to help people see these different relationships that they have. I often get asked, what's your main niche as a coach, right? And I say relationships. They're like, oh, like close, intimate relationships. I'm like, no, like life is relationship. Like we have a relationship with just so many different things. Like even now, sat in your seat, you have a relationship with the seat. It's like, do I move? Like we're constantly choosing. You have a relationship with your partner. That is like the close, intimate one. You've got a relationship with time, past, future. How are you holding that? How are you perceiving that? Yeah. So there's all these different relationships that we have as a being. So if you can master those, you master your life. And that can take a little bit. I'm still working on those too. I'm not one of those people that just sit here going, oh, I'm just figured it all out. It's just like, no, we're all a work in progress.
You
Right.
figured it all out, and what's the point? You might as well just like walk into the ocean and be like, right, I'm done. Nothing left to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Just like, I've completed Earth School. What's next?
Yeah, you need those challenges. Little change of subject. I think I saw on one of your posts talking about affirmations and tools. So, what's your view on those things?
Yeah.
On like that, yeah. What's your view on affirmations and other tools like that?
Yeah. So for me, unless you've done the deeper work, you're kind of, like, I'm not really a tools guy, I'm an awareness guy, right? Because in the absence of, or let's put it in, when you increase awareness, tools become redundant, right? So to explain it a little bit deeper, it's that you could be stood in front of the mirror shouting, I'm amazing, I'm incredible, I'm strong, right? But the little voice in the back of the head's going, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. And that's that the ego, the deeper level of code that has not been addressed. So that's trying to overcome what you don't want, which takes us back to earlier in the conversation. Because you're in resistance to what you don't want, you're trying to use force to overcome it by shouting in the mirror. But if anyone got to their true nature, which is joy, love, freedom, peace, that is like, for me, what we truly are at our deepest level, then once that becomes like somebody's truth, then there's no need to shout in the mirror, because it's just, that is their truth now. So for me, affirmations, they can be great once you reach that deeper level of code, and then you're just affirming truth. But unless you've got to truth, you're swimming upstream. You're not going anywhere. And that's why they don't work. And that's why people get, personal growth doesn't work, or affirmations don't work. So they can be okay. But to be honest, once you actually for yourself know there's nothing wrong with you, there just isn't. Right. And once that, like, for some people, that's going to be grating, because they're like, no, like, they'll want to have a conversation with me. Like, I'll show you what's wrong with me. And I've got this, and this evidence. No one's ever won that conversation with me. Right. So from that standpoint, when somebody truly realizes their true worth, then for me, there's no need for affirmations. It's just like, I'm just free. Okay. What should we do now? Like, everything's available. Like, all limits have been just shattered. And for me, that's just a profound place to live from.
Yeah, I've always felt a little bit skeptical of affirmations and things of that sort, just because, as you're saying, it does seem to be skimming over the stuff that's deeper beneath that. And also, as you said a little bit earlier as well, like the very common theme of just feeling like you're not enough. That is something that I remember really feeling and tapping into, becoming aware of, probably for the first time like last year, that was like a deep subconscious belief, a pattern that was really running the show, and that everything externally was trying to, I guess, almost fight against. whether that be business, whether that be going and working out, whether that be relationship, it was all trying to resist that deeper belief. And I think when you can come into awareness of that, and as you say, like try to like solidify that awareness over time, that's when greater freedom can really be found. It's not found from just telling yourself you're this, that, and the other in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. I thank you for sharing that, right? Because it's just everybody will be able to resonate. That was my main pattern too. Probably why we're on the call is like we have a resonance. That's how frequency works for me. That's it's a different conversation, but it's super powerful, right? But yeah, it's when you first you've got to become aware that you're living in the world of I'm not enough and I'm trying to overcome it. And I don't know about you, but for me, it was pretty exhausting. Yeah, because what is enough? We're programmed by society, our environment, peer group, whatever that is. It's like, I've got to be that standard. And when I am, I can relax. But it's going against the lie that was set up when we were younger that has us believe that we're not enough. And it's investigating that truth. So, like, first awareness, okay, I believe I'm somehow inadequate, I'm not enough, right? And is that then true? And it never is, because I always ask people like, do you have like this physical manufacturing label inside of you, inside of your body that says, Christian, born, where were you born?
Maidstone in Kent.
Yeah, awesome. So it'd be like, do you, Christian, have a physical manufacturing label that says Christian born in Maidstone is not enough? Like, do you have that inside of you?
No.
No, right? It's not there. So where does it exist?
Up here.
Yeah, right. And that's what I love about Pete Crone. He was the person who inspired that question for me to share with others. And it's just like, because you go, oh, okay, this evidence that I have is pretty flawed, right? It doesn't actually exist apart from my view of myself, right? So when that becomes clear, it's like, oh, there's nothing actually wrong with me. Oops. And then everything's possible. But yeah, it really is pretty exciting when you get to that deeper level of code and you start to disprove it. It's just freeing, because these words that we have, that we use, how we articulate ourselves and who we say that we are, they've literally become like this boundary wall of our soul. It just becomes limited and we can't break free from that. So when we change the code, the language, we shift perspective. And when you're seeing things differently, then anything's possible. So that's how we do it. That's like the hierarchy.
Very powerful stuff. Going back to what we briefly mentioned with regards to society and telling you need to do this and that in order to be enough, to be successful. Something that I like, again, from Eckhart Tolle, he talks about the horizontal and the vertical dimension. The horizontal dimension being playing the game of trying to accumulate more success, more status, more wealth, relationships, all of that stuff that the majority of us live pretty primarily occupied with. And then the vertical dimension being coming deeper into relation, into connection with yourself, with who you are beyond just your physical form and the things that you like to identify with. One of the things that I find, I suppose, a little bit challenging is trying to find that balance between, okay, obviously I live in the 21st century. I need to make money so I can have food on the table, to have relationships, all this stuff. So obviously there has to be some concern for that horizontal dimension, for my job, my business success, relationships, how much money I have in the bank, all that stuff. But at the same time, I also don't want to be completely, overwhelmingly concerned with that stuff at the expense of the vertical dimension and not pay any attention to that. How do you find sort of managing those two aspects to who you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's one I get a lot. It's how do I balance that? And for me, it's a fundamental understanding is that like our inner world leads our outer world. So like I'm listening to your language, and it's just like I need to like do this, and I must do that, and I have to, right? in the outer world. But it can be quite confronting for people, but I'd say you don't have to. But those words, they create pressure. And what you're basically saying is, I don't trust. Right? But if you can actually have a trust in life, that life's got your back, which it can be hard for people, but in ways that I don't understand, that there's like a trapeze artist that's got like a net underneath that will catch them if they fall. If we knew that, and that was rock solid for us, then we would move forward with no concern. So when you really get that, actually, it's if we can focus on our inner world of that, would, you said horizontal, and what was the other one? Vertical. Yeah, vertical. Yeah. So for me, that's more like going quantum. Quantum versus the linear, right? But yeah, it's when you can really sit within that level of the soul, let's say, then from there, you're vibing at a different frequency. And therefore everything just starts to work. That's what we call flow, dropping into flow, or people call it the flow state. I don't like that, because it's like, it says it's temporary. Mm. But flow for me is a way of being. Like, life happens for me. And that's not coming at it from a place of arrogance. It's just like, no, sometimes stuff turns up that like my little ego doesn't want, right? And there's resistance to it. But if that's happening for me, if that's allowing me to learn and I grow through that event, if that's my perspective, because I trust in life, then I'm going to move through that in a very different way than if I, complain about it and I blame someone else for it. Like, there's no power there. There's no responsibility, right? So to balance that out, I would say it's actually re-identifying. And this is one of the funnest things like I do normally in like week one of like my group coaching course. And it's completely shifting people's identity of who they believe themselves to be. And I do it in a way that I take them through the different layers of identity perception. Because you started the question before, it was like, how I identify. You use the word identify when you're watching this back, right? Or editing it. Maybe you won't watch your back those. But it's just like, I'm listening to that language, and it's just like, when you shift identity, because most people are like, I'm this meat suit, right? I'm this body, right? When you actually see, no, you have a body, that's totally different. It's not to say you don't look after it, but you've got this vehicle to traffic through like this world. Okay, cool. But when you see that you're not actually it, because it kind of fails the perception test and the permanence test, then people are like, oh, damn, like this thing's morphed. Like since I was 5, I've got different clothes now than I did as a 5-year-old. This thing's constantly in flux. Yet there was a deeper part of me that was always there, that's observed that. And then we go a layer deeper. We're like looking then at this identity that we say that we are. Like, Gary is helpful. It's like, Gary, do you want a donut? Not that I eat donuts, but it's just like, I'm like, okay, yeah, great. I respond. Otherwise, it's a bit rude. I'm not like, I'm this infinite being, nameless. Probably am, right? But different conversation. But so when you go out and you start to explore your identity, it's like, Chris, Christian, whichever you prefer. Like, did you choose it? Did you choose your name?
Wanted to me.
Exactly. So this main label that we have that encompasses our entire persona, identity, ego, whatever label like floats your boat. It's just like, we didn't even choose the main one that holds it all together. And it's just like, oh, okay. And then we look into these like traits of the persona, like I'm not enough, and like all this stuff. And we did it with you, like it's just not true. Right. And so that layer falls apart. And then it's like, you look at thoughts, next layer. Okay. People are like, well, I am my mind, I am my thoughts. I'm like, interesting. Like, where do thoughts go once you've had them? And you start to see, oh, I have thoughts. I'm not my thoughts. Like, try turning them off. It doesn't go well, right? It keeps going. It's like this incessant track. So once you get to like what I say is what we truly are, and I didn't say who we are, but what, because for me, that's just like my preference. It's like, it's so obvious, but it's like, I call that, I just give it a label so people can hold it as the observer.
Mm.
Yeah. And like different teachers will use different words. Like Eckhart Tolle, I think, uses like the watcher. Yeah. I used that initially when I started coaching. People say it's a bit creepy. I was
Yes.
like, I was like, oh, okay, let's make it an observer. Right. So yeah, it's like when you can like start to see what you're not, a lot of what you're holding on to goes with that. So yeah, I consider that like I have a body. It's an awesome piece of machinery. And it's what allows me to traffic through this world. So I'm gonna look after it because I love this experience. It's awesome. It's so much fun. That, and I've got to keep up with my lady, who, you know, Becca, is, you know, 12 years younger than me, and she's quick, right? So it's, you know, but I've always looked after my body. Yeah. And yeah, do I have a persona in this world? Yeah, Gary, the mindset coach, whatever you want to call me, right? It's just like, so I have that, but I'm able to then be in the world, but I'm not impacted by it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think the majority of people are quite heavily identified with their form, their labels. I myself am identified, but I also do have the, I guess, the recognition that I am more than just this physical outer form, more than just the labels that have been sometimes assigned, sometimes I've created for myself. And it's just reminding yourself of that, remembering that in the moments when life is more challenging, when things aren't quite going the way that I'd like them to, and stepping out of that rigid identification. And as you were saying, recognizing you're not all that, and also having that level of trust in life, in the way that it's unfolding, which something that I remember I was listening just the other day, I was listening back to one of my old podcast episodes with a couple of my friends. And one of the things that we were sort of reflecting on the year just gone and looking ahead to 2023. And one of the things that I said that I would like to I guess try and do a better job at would be more just being more trusting in life,
Yeah.
accepting things the way they are, not resisting quite so much, and just accepting and trusting that things will unfold as they are supposed to. As you were saying, life works for you.
Yeah, it's a total different shift in language and a totally different perspective. But one of the things that really allowed me to step into that was when I got that the nature of life is uncertainty. And it's like our little ego, bless its little heart, thinks that it has control. We have no control, right? So it's not just to go like, if you're in this river, let's say, and you just like, you know, F it, I'm just gonna like lay back in the river and let it take me. No, like, got to be a good swimmer, right? But it's really recognizing like the nature of life is uncertainty. Because if I was to ask you, has something ever happened in your world that you weren't expecting?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever been like so certain of something, but it didn't turn out to go that way?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So it's like I often do this in like a room full of like hundreds of people. I'm like, show me your certainty. And there's always the joker that says death and, you know, from Dubai taxes, right? It's just like so it's just like when I really got that the nature of life is uncertainty, but I've got this brain that is rooted in survival, that is just trying to predict and protect. That's its mechanism, keep us alive. So it's trying to control. So I've got this brain that's trying to control everything, yet the game zone we're in is, hey, it's uncontrollable. And I just got it that that was just so futile. I'm playing life with the wrong like rule set. So it's not to be reckless, but it's when you really like embrace that life is uncertainty, what's so cool is that if life is uncertainty, then it's also limitless possibility because anything's possible. And then it's like, what do you want to create? And then for me, that was just so expansive. and you just literally shift into a new paradigm. Like everything changes.
And again, like you were saying, right, when we first started talking, it comes down to the perspective. It's like life is uncertainty. How do you want to take that? How do you want to view that? You
Yeah.
know, and view it as, oh my God, I have no ability to predict what's going to happen next. How am I going to like resolve all of my issues, and how am I going to live this life? Or you can be like, oh, right, life is uncertainty. I have no clue what's going to happen next. So why not just be open to all possibilities and just trust in what unfolds? But yeah,
Yeah. You know, it sounds super simple. For a lot of people, it's like their worst nightmare. It's just like, no, must control. You know, this is, you know, where the anxieties come in. Like, I'm not safe in that moment is a very present tense version of anxiety. It's like if we were to decode, like that's their experience, and more future based in time, it's like, I'm not going to be okay, is the fear, right? So I better control everything, right? So, but that's not a peaceful world. And when there is no control, everything starts to shift, but it can take a little time to let go of that. But yeah, it, like you said, it's totally different, but it allows you to open up at least into considering trusting in life.
mm,
But once you gain enough references that life is happening for you, not against you, like in this victim mode, well, then that builds confidence in the other direction. And then it's like you're now in this like virtuous spiral up rather than the one I was in like a couple of times in my life, as I've shared, like this vicious one downwards, right? So it's momentum. But yeah, for me, when I really got that about uncertainty and that being the nature of life, just it gives you a whole new perspective, as you said. And when that becomes your perspective, that's out of which your thoughts arise, your feelings are generated, and therefore will impact your actions moving forward. So that's why for me, I'm always looking at what lens is someone looking through that they're oblivious, that they're looking through it as the observer. Nice little props here, right? But it's just like, if the observer's back here, I'm not going to say what that is, but let's just call it the observer looking through this lens of limitation, the ego, then that's going to determine how I perceive the world. It's going to therefore generate the thoughts I have, the feelings I have. And when I'm thinking and feeling a certain way, I'm going to take certain action. So if the lens is like, oh no, this is scary, well, then I'm going to have scary thoughts, feelings of anxiety, and the behavior that follows is going to be some form of control generally. You know, fight, flight, or freeze. You might fight, yeah, you might run, you might just stop, whatever that is. Whatever has got you through in your life that you've learned works to keep you alive. Yeah, you could be at school and you stand up and teachers ask you a question and you just, where's India on the map, Chris? And you're just like, oh, it's on page 52, right? And everyone laughs, right? You know, how you page 54, right? It's just like, depending on how you adapt to that in that moment will likely set off a track of how you are adapting in your life now unconsciously, right? So, if you sleep down your chair and you get low enough and everyone finally stops laughing, like an introvert might be born, right? Or if you like really play on it and like be an extrovert, now you're the joker, right? And like, or you might smack the kid next to you, not condoning that behavior, but that might shut everybody up and now you've got an angry person. It's just learned behavior, survival adaptation, right? So this is why I said at the start, just handling behavior does nothing because you haven't got to the root that's driving the behavior. So when we get back here, like there's no need going back to tools to learn new behavior because it just falls away naturally. That's the dissolution.
Yeah, you want to go a layer deeper. It makes
Yeah.
perfect. I'm conscious of your time, Gary. I'm gonna round things up with one last deep question, which is, what do you think we're all doing here? In your eyes, what is the whole sort of reason that we're all sort of existing in this world and doing what we're doing?
Yeah. So for me, this is just Gary Waters' perspective. It doesn't mean that it's right, but I called it Earth School before for a reason. right? So the way that I see this reality is, it is like a school. Like, we come here in order to learn the lessons that we've experienced, or that were generated, you could call it karma, from previous lifetimes. That's going to be a big step, but it's a deep question, right? Don't normally go into these, but it's just like, it's so fun to have these conversations. So it's that we're here to up level, to advance our level of consciousness. And for me, it's the ultimate game zone, because you've got both available, the highs and the lows. You know, we were talking about Hawkins before, and he's got this map of consciousness where you can literally go from like 1 or like level 20, which is like shame, all the way up to enlightenment, right? So it's just, for me, we're here to evolve. We're here to undo past karma and choose differently. And for me, it's a game of how can I step into more love fundamentally. You know, I often get asked what's my definition of success. And for some people, it's like having a lot of cash, having a big business, like having a perfect relationship, all of these things, you know, then I'll be enough. But for me, success, it's the person that can stay in a level of peace regardless of circumstance. So regardless of what happens, they maintain their peace, and then they move from a level of love. And that for most people is very hard, but that's my commitment, is to consistently find where I bump up against stuff, where I find a little bit of resistance. Yeah, and for me, that's the game zone. That's why it's here, to present me circumstances, different people that just show me that. And then I get my, it's weird, not weird, I just, there's no accidents in my world, but I posted this like literally this morning, like a little quote. And it's about how the stress response is our alarm signal, right? It's there to wake us up. It's showing me where I'm not okay, where I can't maintain that peace that is inherent, that's natural, right? Most people are used to their normal, which might be anxiety or depression, whatever that is, right? But that natural state is peace. So wherever I'm bumping up against it is my opportunity. So for me, it's then a case of how can I love even the people that are challenging to love? And that's more in that unconditional love bucket. I'm not saying that's easy. Yeah, there's a lot of challenge here. There's lots of different levels of consciousness. But I find that whenever I can take a step back, come from understanding and not judgment, drop that, the natural expression is love. So for me, that's been the biggest, I just say, like, the most wonderful thing from being a coach is because I consistently repeat this and like share it with people, help them see it, is that I'd say I've just become very good at not judging people. And it's not to say that that's just like, okay, like I condone stuff. Like, no, but there's no judgment, because I understand why they're there, why they're doing what they're doing. I can get that, which for many people is a challenge, and it used to be for me too, right? So that's my version of success, and what I feel the game is about is like, how can we find more inner peace, which is our natural state, come back to that, and then move from a level of love regardless. And that might mean not being with that person or being in that peer group, yeah, or removing yourself from a situation. It's not condoning it, it's not celebrating it or cheerleading it, but we can always understand it. But that means dropping our ego for that, and that's tough, because that's the game we're in. So how's that for an answer?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I love it. So then, Gary, if people want to learn more about you, potentially work with you down the line, where would you like to direct them? What should they do?
Yeah, so the most direct place is my website, garywaters.co.uk, or I am on Instagram. I am Gary Waters. The normal Gary Waters handle was taken, been trying to get that for a while. It's gone. So I am Gary Waters. That's the main platform I use. I am on kind of Facebook and sorry, I said that, TikTok, but Those I'm not really. So the gram's probably like the other place to get me. I have some other people posting for me on those other platforms. So yeah, that would be the place, mate.
I'm with you on that. TikTok is not a world that I've really ventured into just yet. I'm steering clear of that. I think I'll just stick to the Instagram for the most part.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate your wisdom, and yeah, take care.
Thank you, buddy, and thank you for your time.